All right, in this video, we're going to briefly talk about DevOps and what is DevOps, and talk about some of the different tools and processes that you may encounter when you're implementing the DevOps approach. So let's go ahead and skip to those slides here and begin to talk about DevOps. All right, so the question is, what is DevOps? You may have heard a lot about it if you've been to any meetups or you've been keeping track of different tech articles. But not recently, I would say probably within the past 10 years, this notion of DevOps came about. And you will see that the big thing with DevOps is this idea of automation. And typically it involves two teams. The development team, those are the people who are the software engineers, your developers, your QA folks, and then you have operations who manage and maintain the various applications and platforms for a particular company. And then this picture does a really good job with kind of showing you the cyclical process between the two teams, where you'll plan, right? And it's kind of following like this, what we call, I would like to say waterfall approach, but not a waterfall approach, but it's a DevOps, well, not a DevOps approach, but it's an approach where what word am I thinking of here? Oh, the system development lifecycle. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for here. The system development lifecycle is where you plan, you analyze, you develop, and then you release that software and you test it, or you test or then you release. And I like to think of it as an acronym of PADI: planning, analysis, design, and implementation. But anyway, this here involves two teams. You have the planning, right? You have the code that's going to be written. You're going to go through the build process. You're going to test it. You're going to release it. But then you'll see that when we get to this part here in the operations, they'll be responsible for deploying and then also how it operates and then monitoring that application. And so it's essentially combining the work of two teams, but trying to combine the work of two teams in a very synchronous way, where no one is stepping on another team's foot, but it's this process or this way of work that allows us to effectively automate the various tasks of these different components within DevOps. And so one of the things, the benefits, is that it's more faster, more reliable if this process is set up in the correct way. So here's a video that I would like for you to take a look at. I would say definitely pause this video and take a look at this video. I think it's about 5 minutes long here, but it really does a really good job with help you understand kind of what I just mentioned here. What is DevOps? All right, so in that video, you may have heard of kind of like basically an overview of what I just mentioned on the previous slide. It's basically the synchronizing the work between the development team and the operations, and they kind of give a really good example of two different personnel on those various teams. One was a system admin that's really kind of monitoring the application, the various servers the application exists on, and obviously the developer, who has a bunch of different tasks in terms of helping to iterate on top of that application and so forth. And so, but the DevOps process is the synchronous process of how do they orchestrate work and then introducing new tools that will allow them to automate their processes. Here's a case study that we're going to talk about. It's basically a company here in Minneapolis called Jamf, and they deploy software to Mac devices. And so we're going to go over this case study when we're together and begin to talk about some of the things that stood out from that case study. And so we're going to talk about some of the different observations, some of the tools, and then some of the things that need to be considered when implementing DevOps, a DevOps process into a company. So here's some of the tools that you may have, that was mentioned in that video that we just watched. One, you're going to need a successful version control tool. It may be GitHub or GitLab, or a lot of different companies have their own hosted version of Git. And so I like to use GitHub a lot, which is a very popular version control tool. But I do want to make the distinguish that Git and GitHub is different. Git is a version control tool, but it really stands apart from GitHub. GitHub is essentially a service that host cloud repositories. And we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks here. There's Docker and Kubernetes. There's GitHub Actions and Jenkins, which serves as a CI or CD tools, a continuous delivery tool. So CI stands for continuous integration. CD stands for continuous deployment or continuous delivery. And so there's tools that will be representing CI/CD. You have Azure DevOps, and Azure DevOps is really its own platform that helps us manage and maintain work and host code. And so Azure DevOps tries to bring in a platform where various teams can work together and manage work, but also have access to the applications that they're working on. And then you have Jasmine and Selenium, which are testing tools where when you do create a CI/CD, you're going to you're going to basically put in some of your testing suites and testing software to test your application along the CI pipeline. Then you have, like I said, there's monitoring tools. New Relic is something that was mentioned in that video. And New Relic is a tool that monitors the clusters of applications. And then you have hosting environments like Heroku, AWS, Google Cloud. And then also those particular environments have monitoring tools as well that you can hook up and monitor your applications uptime and downtime, and also how much resources is being allocated to those applications. All right, in this next slide here, it kind of gives you a visual of the CI/CD process. And this is one of the tools here that you'll hook up to your application. It's basically CI, like I said, it stands for continuous integration, continuous development, continuous deployment. And so some of those popular tools would be GitHub Actions, which was recently launched. You have Jenkins. There's something called Circle CI. So there's a lot of different CI tools, and a good CI tool will facilitate this process for us. And this shows a picture of this, like the developers are working on some of the information or application features or a bug fix or a task. You're going to check in those changes to the source code, and the source code is going to run through this process here where you're going to build the application. It's going to build the application on your behalf. And this is what the CI tool does, right? It's going to build an application. It may build it up and create a Docker container. You're going to test it, and it's going to let you know whether or not it tests or failed. And that's what that CI tool is doing. It's going to actually build it for you. It'll run your test suite. It'll probably send it to a test environment so that people can actually physically test the application or manually test the application. And it'll let you know whether those tests failed or succeeded. And then, like I said, this is that whole process of continuous integration. And then it'll notify if success or failure, if the team needs to basically do some more development on the application, or if it checks out fine, right? If it's successful, let's move to the next stage and deploy. And that's what you have another deployment tool, continuous deployment tool that you would also monitor and maintain. And so that's kind of the cyclical process that's happening here with this image. All right, so I'm going to pause this tool. The next video, we're going to talk about application tools and talk about what are some of the different tools we would use to build our applications, whether it's front end or back end. And so that's what the next video is going to get us into.